Troy Bauer. Troy is a BASF seed treatment technical field representative for the Western Corn Belt. Troy, nice to have you with us.
Thrilled to be here today. Thanks for the opportunity. Wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about utilizing seed treatments for in-season nematode management. Caitlin hit on this, but really, as we talk about soybean cyst nematode, we really need to approach this as an integrated management system. And it's really important as we try to maintain our yield potential for our soybeans out there. And as we think about the management options that we have out there, we really need the soil sample to understand the pest severity in our fields. We want to plant resistant soybean varieties out there, so continue using or rotate varieties that have PI 88788 source cyst resistance. There are some sources of resistance out there, such as Peking as well, and so utilize those when they are available. And there will be more unique novel types of resistance, so utilize those as they become available. Certainly crop rotation is one of the most important aspects to managing soybean cyst nematode levels, so utilize that. And then we talk about utilizing nematode protectant seed treatments, and we're going to hit on that a little bit more. So as we talk about utilizing seed treatments, we wanted to hit on a couple of things here. Certainly as you utilize newer and improved sources of genetics, the high cost of seed and seed technologies, it's really important to protect the seed and to maximize that return on seed investment with seed treatments. We really want to establish a full stand with robust seedlings, and it's a very important component to maximizing the yield potential on every acre that you have out there. And I think growers recognize that. And from the industry standpoint, the industry really recognizes that seed treatments need to be a value-added proposition. We expect seed treatments to be easy to handle and apply to seeds, and it's a very good complement to protect the genetic improvements and the technologies that the growers have out there. I think oftentimes it's very important to remember that growers only really get one chance to establish that optimal stand, and seed treatments are very important to ensure that every seed produces its maximum genetic yield potential, and we want to protect that seedling as much as what we can, and that's really what seed treatments are all about. So turning back more to nematodes and how seed treatments work in that, how do nematodes reduce yield without visible signs of damage? Certainly, Caitlin covered some of this, but soybean cyst nematode enter those plant roots, they establish feeding sites, they steal resources from the plants, and that leads to more yield loss. And you can see that nematode entering that root on the upper left-hand picture there. Those wounds that are created by feeding can also cause cell death and weaken the plant. That damage increases as nematodes develop into adults and approach that reproductive stage. And the cysts contained on those roots really have hundreds of eggs in each one of those. So you can start from a single nematode and have a total explosion into a number of nematodes by the end of the season. And depending on how you graph out the numbers, you can go from one cyst up to 1 million cysts in a year, depending on the weather that you experience, how early you plant, and how prolific those cysts are in the soil. So that's why it's so important to have a good management strategy in place for soybean cyst nematodes. So turning specifically and talking about some of the seed treatments that are commercially available on the marketplace, this would be a study that was conducted in a greenhouse setting comparing several seed treatments that are commercially available. And we inoculated the soybean plants in this case with a J2 stage of a soybean cyst nematode. So soybean cyst nematode goes through several juvenile stages before they get to adult, and then those adults then produce eggs, and you go through that whole cycle again. And so in this case, we inoculated plants with the J2 stage, and you can look at the various treatments there on the bars. Those are stacked bars, and look at the total soybean cyst nematodes that resulted from each one of those treatments. So starting first at the left-hand side, that would be our base fungicide and insecticide treatment. followed by ILEVO at the SDS and nematode rate, or just the nematode rate alone would be the third bar. And then we had AVEO, BioST, and Cloriva for the last three treatments there. So you can see that dark blue portion of the bar would be the J2 stage, and if you're essentially shutting down the progression of the life cycles, you would have a larger blue portion because they're not going ahead and going to the J3 and the J4 stage. That gray portion would be when they progressed all the way through the adult stage. So in the case of ILEVO, at the two rates that we have commercially available, we see very little, if any, progression through to the adult stage in this study that was conducted. So that was from a lab setting or a greenhouse setting. Let's take that to the field. What did we see in 2019 as a result? This would be from some of the sponsored trials that we had on the left-hand side, looking at soybean cyst nematode counts per 5 plants. Again, you can see the base seed treatment on the left-hand side and what ILEVO did on the right-hand side. And this was from several locations, including Missouri this last year. And so that would be the result that we saw on the soybean cyst nematode counts, but what did that mean for the grower in terms of yield and return on investment? And again, this would be locations where we had moderate nematode pressure, which we defined as greater than 2,000 eggs per cc of soil. We saw a 2.2 bushel per acre yield response in these very controlled settings. So a very good return on investment, and this would be at the soybean cyst nematode rate of ILEVO. Taking that to the next step, we have some newer competitors that have entered the marketplace, so we wanted to go back and reconduct some of these studies last winter. So this would be, again, from a controlled type scenario. We have the soybean cyst nematode eggs per gram of root on the left axis, and then we have the various treatments across the bottom that would be represented by the bars. So that dark gray bar would be the base fungicide seed treatment. You can see ILEVO at the SDS plus nematode rate, where we actually reduce the number of eggs per gram of root compared to BioST, Heads Up, and Murtec, Saltro, and then Saltro with the addition of Cloriva. If you go to the far right three bars, they would be labeled for the nematode rate. So this would be ILEVO at the nematode rate. Again, very similar to what we would see at the SDS and nematode rate versus AVEO and Cloriva. So we saw very good activity in our controlled setting, and that would be 30 days after inoculation. And we conducted a soybean cyst nematode root extraction. But what did we see in the field in 2020? And this would be from grower fields, where growers conducted side-by-sides or split planters, and we went out and dug up plants and looked at them. And this is actually a picture from Good Hope, Illinois, where we dug plants on June 29th and put them up essentially on the bed of the pickup there. So you can see, as you look at that right picture, the soybean cyst nematodes are marked by the arrows pointing to the roots. You can see the Saltro-treated plants on the left-hand side versus ILEVO on the right. So ILEVO does a very good job of protecting the base of the root around where that treated seed was in the soil. And as those roots grow out, occasionally you can get a few soybean cyst nematodes, and we do have a couple of those cysts marked on the ILEVO roots, but certainly much better protection there versus the competitor on the left-hand side there. Very similar situation to Kewanna, Indiana. Again, you can see the ILEVO treatment versus the Saltro on the right in this case, and we've circled the cyst on the root, so you can see the comparisons of the root. And then finishing up with some roots from Bauer, Illinois, planted on May 22nd and then dug on July 14th. So again, ILEVO does a great job of protecting the base of the root where that treated seed was in the soil. And that's where we see the main benefit in terms of increased yield potential by protecting the base of the root. So just as a reminder, from an integrated soybean cyst nematode management strategy, it's very critical to manage the soybean cyst nematode levels in your soil. And that's part of an entire system where you really need to soil sample your field to understand the pest severity that's out there. plant resistant soybean varieties, rotate to non-host crops, and use a nematode protectant seed treatment to really help manage those levels in your soil. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Dave. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.